Hi, I'm Catherine Wheeler for FPTV in Washington, D.C., the birthplace of the drug war. In his recent provocative cover story for Foreign Policy magazine, Dr. Ethan Nadelmann, Executive Director of the Drug Policy Alliance, argues that it's time to stop prohibiting drugs like marijuana, cocaine, and heroin. The article outraged some of the leading strategists in the drug war, including Dr. David Murray, Chief Scientist at the U.S. Office of National Drug Control Policy. FPTV sat down with Dr. Nadelmann and Dr. Murray and asked them this question: is the U.S. winning the war on drugs?
Yeah, in fact, we're making major progress, and most importantly, it's very much better than the alternative, the only realistic alternative, which is to do nothing or to give in, which is a complete disaster. In fact, we have major progress on demand reduction, on supply reduction, on changing the violence, on affecting and damming the capacity of drug traffickers to do their job. Unfettered, we are hurting them, and it's making an impact, and we have data to show it. And people who argue that it's time to give in or appease or move towards legalization almost always have to do two things. They have to overstate the damage done by the continuing struggle against drugs, and they have to understate the world that we would enter into if we stopped this struggle. And both of those are not true.
There's probably no other war that has failed longer and more costly than the war on drugs. I mean, we had the Vietnam War, we had the war in Iraq. Those appear to be major failures, costing huge numbers of lives. But the war on drugs has cost, what, $500 billion over the last few decades? The number of people who have died indirectly from AIDS and the drug war and incarceration is astounding. It's a long, slow, devastating failure.
So what is the impact of federal policy on reducing the demand for drugs?
The demand side has gone down dramatically. And that's something that we don't see acknowledged or even recognized in the drug legalization argument. They say you'll never make any progress against demand. It's perpetual, it's futile, it's Sisyphean to push that stone. The heck it is. Between 2001 and 2006, there has been a 25% reduction on the part of young people, the people entering into their drug career, people between 12 and 18, 18 to 25-year-old is the world where people use the most drugs and get themselves into dependency. There's been a 25% reduction in their illicit drug use of marijuana, 23% reduction in their overall use of any illicit drug in the United States. That's dramatic downturn.
You know, by and large, the numbers about how many people use drugs kind of goes up and down over time. It went up in the 70s, down in the 80s, up in the 90s, down a little bit more recently. Ultimately, that's not so much about policy. It's about changes in culture, changes in fashion. It's, if you look at why hairstyles and clothing styles or food styles go up and down, it's similar with drugs. The more important question actually is not how many people told the government pollster that they used marijuana last year. The more important question is how many people are getting hurt by drugs and how many people are getting hurt by the drug war. How many people died of an overdose fatality last year? If that went up, we're failing. How many people contracted HIV or Hep C? If that went up, we're failing. So if marijuana use goes up a bit, or goes down a bit, I should say, but meanwhile overdose fatalities are going up, new incarcerations are going up, new infections are going up, that's failure.
Is legalization a viable option? What should be the U.S. government's next move in the drug war?
We have to accept the fact that drugs are here to stay. We have to accept the reality that there are always going to be drugs, that there's never been a drug-free society, there's never going to be a drug-free society. We have to accept the fact that in the next generation, the generation after that, we'll have even more drugs. We'll have Ritalin generation 4 and Prozac generation 8 and ecstasy generation 11 and concoctions combining these things, that there is no way to prevent this from happening, whether we like it or not. In that world, what are we going to do? Are we just going to lock up 1 million Americans for buying, selling, and using this stuff? Or are we going to figure out that we have these drugs out there for better and for worse, and that our ultimate objective is to ensure that they are used with the least possible harm, and in some cases, the greatest possible benefits?
The drug legalization scheme is a bit of a utopian dream that maybe occurs when you're in your junior year in college after a few beers in the dorm room thinking, let's legalize it, that'll take care. It doesn't take care of the problem as near as we can tell. The drugs themselves are an enormous threat. They're threats because they destroy lives, and they destroy families, and they destroy countries. We and the rest of the civilized world has made this decision. This must be fought. It must be pushed back against, minimized as best we can. To say it's time to give in, to appease, to condone, to accept, and to enable, I think is a profound mistake, It's morally highly problematic. It's politically, as it should be, a bad choice. And epidemiologically, from a public health perspective, it's a silly disaster.